So unless there's any objection, I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Organized Residential Waste and Recycling Collection Citizens Committee to order. It's 6:02 p.m. on Monday, October 12th. Our first order of business is approval of the previous minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Jeff has moved to approve. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Member Green. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Speak now. Motion to approve minutes passes unanimously. Our next agenda item is recognition of public comment. At this time, anyone who has joined us from the public who has comments to offer to the committee can please use the raise hand function to raise your hand and be addressed. The first hand I see raised is Claudine Berger. So Claudine, please go ahead with your comments.
Okay, I have a number of questions. And the first one is, I walked 6 blocks in the last 2 days. Nobody knows about those meetings. So during a pandemic, when people are at home, raising children, trying to come to grips with their lives, would it not be important that any meeting is more publicized than people having to get the idea with 3 children, teaching at home, grappling with their jobs or non-existent jobs? Would it not be important on your end to publicize those meetings other than you have to go to the website? Nobody knows. So my assumption, maybe wrongfully so, has to be that you don't want to know people about those meetings. So in spring, May, June, July, August, we got brochures from the city of Englewood of how to use the library, and it was flashy, it was glossy, but everything was closed. So there was no point of doing that. But in a meeting that is that important to individual citizens, why does nobody know? There are more questions. I'm just waiting for an answer.
So please proceed with your additional questions. I'll note these one by one.
Okay. The second question is, this seems to be, from what I understand, and I could be wrong as I am not in on all the planning meetings, this seems to be a meeting to force citizens to all jump onto to be forced to use one company for trash. Is that correct? Because why do we need a big brother to dispose of our trash? I do believe that I don't throw my trash, and many other citizens don't throw their trash into the streets or into the neighbors' yards. We dispose of it properly, or we team up. So why do we have to be forced to use a company? Because that, and I might be wrongfully accusatory here, that smells of kickback to me. And that's my big comment.
So those comments are noted, and we appreciate you appearing to provide us with public comment. I can provide some small clarification if the committee does not object to me speaking on behalf of the committee regarding those 2 questions.
No objection.
So the first question regarding publication of the meetings, there is a requirement under Colorado law regarding open meetings and the publication of those open meetings. And my understanding is that these meetings, like all city meetings, have met those requirements. As far as flyering a neighborhood is concerned or sending out some sort of special notice, I don't believe that did occur. However, the statutory requirement has been met. We're meeting publicly here tonight, and I don't believe that there's been any attempt to keep this held as secret. The second question regarding being forced to use one company or another, the purpose of this committee is to evaluate proposals to send Englewood to a single hauler. At the conclusion of this committee, the hope is that the committee will be able to send recommendations to council. Any decision regarding waste collection, centralized or organized under a single hauler, will be made by the Englewood City Council, not by this committee. So we are a group of citizens here to serve our city and to provide guidance to the decision makers in the city regarding a single hauler of trash.
So I apologize for asking that again. Why? Why do we have to have single hauler trash? Why can we not be assumed to be adult enough to make those decisions ourselves?
That question was addressed in one of our early meetings by one of our very committee members. Why are we doing this? And the answer is we're exploring this as an option. We're not doing anything right now.
Okay, I apologize for not being in one of the earlier meetings. I didn't know. I was out of the country, but I am here now. So that still doesn't answer the question though. And I know you're exploring, but if, let's say there are 12 members on this committee and 3 agree, 3 disagree and the rest agrees, that means citizen voices are not actually being heard. Because most citizens don't actually know this is going on.
So I understand your objection and the argument that you've presented. And once again, I'll say that the purpose of this committee is for citizens to have voices. And you may choose to address those complaints to council regarding both communication and the question of whether or not we actually need this system.
Is any of this recorded? Does anybody record this meeting?
We'll ask staff to clarify that, but I believe all these meetings are recorded and broadcast live both.
Okay, thank
Point of
you.
order, Chairman Ward. My understanding is this is public comment in which a comment can be issued and heard, not necessarily a question and answer period.
Okay, I'll be quiet. Note taken.
Thank you, Member Fraser, for that. That is correct, although I don't know that the committee has officially landed on an approach to public comment at this point. Bob's rules would indicate that's my understanding, yes.
And Chair Ward, just to confirm, these are being recorded and streamed live during the event. And then available afterwards, they're uploaded to the city's website.
Thank you for that clarification, Maria. I believe we have one hand raised amongst the attendees. The phone shows calling user 2.
Good evening. My name is Maureen White, and I'm calling to tell you my thoughts. But to follow up on what the previous speaker said, I've received 5 postcards, very nice, large postcards from the city. 2 on stormwater, 1 on the alley sweeping, 1 on street sweeping, and 1 on the census that the city obviously paid for. So I agree that there could have been a notice to go out at least one time to all the citizens. I will be opting out because of physical circumstances that I have along with my property. So if I'm understanding correctly, there's to be an opt-out fee. And I want to say I've never heard of paying for something that you choose not to be part of. And I'm not even sure that could be legal. I think if enough people come together and say, we're opting out and, we're not going to pay to opt out, that might create an issue. If that fee is intended to make sure everyone has trash service per the charter, that's code enforcement's job to make sure that our alleys aren't trashy. The other thing that seems strange to me is we have the concrete service, repair service, that people were allowed to opt out of, but those of us that didn't, we pay for that to keep the concrete up in front of our houses, and yet the people that opt out, it's up to them to hire somebody to make sure their sidewalks are repaired and safe for everybody. And I actually fell in the wintertime with just enough snow to cover my neighbor's sidewalk that was uneven at the joints because he opted out, and the city came out and measured and told me, oh, that's not enough. And this summer I noticed what they're repairing in front of my house because I opted in, and it's a lot less difference than what I tripped over. So I think that the city seems to be ignoring the repairs of the people who opt out because they don't want to hassle with forcing them to get their sidewalks repaired. So why in one service were they allowed to opt out and charge no administrative fee, and yet on this trash hauling, single business hauler, why should we have to pay to opt out? And that's my concern. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Ms. White. The one thing I'll note in response directly to your comment is that no decisions have been made as of yet. It is this committee's purpose to make recommendations to council. And we do appreciate that feedback because it's helpful in forming our recommendations to council.
Okay, thank you.
If there are any other members of the public on the phone right now who would like to make comment, please use the raise hand function. Seeing none, I will conclude that portion of our agenda as closed. We'll move on to new business. So I'd like to open this up briefly with just some comments. The primary purpose of this particular meeting is administrative in nature. It was important for the committee to meet and discuss some ground rules, as we did have some email exchanges that did not benefit the committee and were questionable at best under the open meetings requirements. So I wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page about what is required of members of the committee and what the expectations are of members of the committee for each other and for staff. So we will talk about a number of things, communication being probably the biggest. Also, I would like to set a fixed meeting schedule, as I did receive some pushback about the multiple rescheduled meetings. And I think it would just be easier for all of the group members to manage attendance if we did have a fixed meeting schedule, a set date and time that we could expect to meet either monthly or twice a month. And having said that, I will now give the table to Maria to clarify any of those comments and talk about some of the potential staff concerns with the administrative issues that are being brought up in tonight's agenda.
All right, thank you, Chair Ward. I'm going to share my screen and just pull up the agenda here. All right, so so as Chair Ward mentioned, there are several topics that we're going to cover tonight, those being primarily communication. And I'll come back to these, setting agenda items and how that's done, because we had some questions about that. Then establishing a set meeting date and/or time. Expectations for how and what staff communicates to committee members. And finally, our process for determining decisions and next steps. So I'll go back, and committee member attendance and availability. So this is a very large committee, probably one of the largest that we have. And so with 11 people, it's somewhat difficult to manage that. And for those of you who have not been exposed to this process before, this will also be educational, hopefully. So first, communication between committee members and between committee members and staff. So as we talked about, the city and other municipalities, the state, any kind of governmental agency within Colorado is subject to the Colorado Open Meetings Law. And so the purpose of that is really to limit decision-making outside of this type of forum where everybody's present, or the majority are present, a quorum is present, to discuss the item so things aren't being done off the record, if you will. So the intent is that we meet as in a meeting setting like this that's open to the public, and that decisions are made on the record. When people start communicating back and forth in email, that's when it can, and when there's more than 3 people present, that's when decisions can sometimes be made. And even though the intent is not necessarily that of the people who are participating, it can become subject to those Colorado Open Meeting Law requirements. So we want to get away from that and really stick to making sure that our discussion items take place at a formal meeting, and that they're added to the agenda in advance. So that doesn't mean that, you know, committee members can't email questions back to staff or anything like that, but we do want to be careful about when we're including everybody in that process. Then setting agenda items. So we want, again, to be upfront about that. Staff, now that we've established a chairperson and a vice chair, we want to make sure that staff is consulting with them and preparing the agenda and the supporting materials in advance of that. So we do receive the chair's approval of the agenda before we actually put it up on the website. And so if you're interested in adding agenda items, committee members should contact the chair, in this case, Steve, with those agenda items, and at least probably usually about a week or so in advance that we're trying to finalize that. But if there's more staff time involved in prepping for that, then we would want as much time as possible. Sometimes at the end of these meetings, we can also talk about next agenda items. That's a good time to bring that up. But then once an agenda is created and that's published out on the website, it must be formally amended at the beginning of the meeting to either add or remove action items. So for example, tonight, while we can certainly talk about new things, we can't actually take formal action on an item tonight unless you were to amend that at the beginning of the meeting. Establishing a set meeting date and time. You know, when we initially started, we were anticipating maybe 3 or 4 meetings. Obviously, it's taken a little bit longer than that for us to come together, which is perfectly fine. But I think, again, just to the finding time where 11 people can make themselves available has been a challenge. So perhaps establishing a set meeting date and time, if it's earlier or later, we can certainly do that and hopefully then get the majority of members to be able to attend that. Then expectations for communication with staff. Again, staff provides a variety of professional assistance and administrative functions. So we're doing other things besides just providing this. And what we try and do, or supporting this committee, so we also try and use judgment to determine what items should be communicated to the rest of the committee. While we can certainly take feedback from committee members and try and disseminate as much information as possible, again, I think that it would be good to put things on the agenda, just even as informational items, so that it's shared with everybody. And if it is something timely, then we would seek the chair's guidance in sending something out to the entire group. So again, we're trying to formalize this on the agenda, and so making sure that people any formal action items are actually voted on by the group. So Lorraine, who's our staff liaison, or excuse me, committee liaison, will actually do a vote when we have a formal action item. She'll call each of your names, and then you'll get to vote one way or the other, either yes or no. we're trying to avoid, just because on Zoom, it's hard to tell sometimes if you say yay or nay. So we were trying to say yes or no, just to be clear about that. But then it's the majority vote of the people who are there actually make the determination of whether that decision goes forward or not. If there's a desire to revisit that, then we would have to put it back on the agenda. For items that are not formal actions, then the chair will lead the discussion and determine the general direction or desires of the committee in order to provide direction to staff. We do take minutes at the meetings, and so you voted on the meetings for last meeting when we have voted, or we had voted for the chair and vice chair. And those action minutes are really decision only, so they're fairly limited. If you do want to go back to the conversations, it'd be best to go back and review the tapes, the video tapes again, if you want to talk to the specifics. And then finally, committee member attendance and availability. I know we've had some discussion about trying to get all members to attend. Well, we can certainly do that. Again, it has been a challenge. And for this particular committee, where it's short-lived, it's not ongoing, there is no requirement that people would have to attend a certain number of meetings, but certainly we want to get as many people as possible. In this case, with a group of 11, you have the quorum, the number of people that it would take to act on formal agenda items would be 6 or more. So you would want to have at least 6 in attendance in order to actually take action. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or turn it back to the chair for discussion.
Thank you for that, Maria. I will just open the floor for discussion, concerns, comments, anything like that. Try to keep it organized. Maybe we use the hand raise function, but if we don't need to, then we don't have to.
So I just go then.
Have at it.
I guess what is, in regard to like the dissemination of information and having us all be aware of what's asked and what's discussed, is there an objection by staff or liaisons of just any of it, sending it out to all of us on email? Is there a reason that we can't just have all discussion between us be made public and transparent among all of us?
Well, I think that's what we're trying to decide. So if that's the direction of the group, then we can certainly do that. Again, that's up to the committee to determine that. And then staff would abide by that.
Personally, I think email communications are challenging among any group. They can get out of control, they can loop around, and then somehow the city needs to be able to track and publish all that. So I'm of the opinion that if we can avoid that, we're better off. And I'm sorry, I think I might have talked over you, Christine.
Sorry, I forgot to raise my hand. I was going to ask how other committees typically do it.
The other ones that I'm on, any question that a committee member sends to staff or chair gets sent out to everybody else on the committee. I'm not just suggesting that we all do open meeting, email, reply all discussions. That's not what I'm asking about. What I'm asking about is any communication between any committee member and staff be disseminated by staff as an informative thing to send out to all of us so we know what all the discussions that are going on are.
So I guess the one I'm most familiar with is our Englewood Transportation Advisory Committee. And so what they do is if they want to have staff research a question or an issue, let's say something comes up from a citizen related to a transportation issue, they will email that to the chair and then copy staff, and then the chair basically directs staff to look into it. And depending on how soon or ahead of the next meeting we are, he gives us discretion as to whether we can respond adequately in the time that we have to put that on the next agenda. But if it's a comment, typically they'll raise that at the meeting, and we do have regular monthly meetings of that group.
I just put in my 2 cents. I think we should absolutely avoid discussion of issues via email, because that has all sorts of open meetings problems and can cause other issues. I don't have an issue with questions being directed to either the chair or staff. It might make more sense to filter through the chair, who can then disseminate how it's handled. But if there are questions that come up in between meetings, I think that's a reasonable approach.
Member Fraser, do you mean that if someone sends a question, then it does get distributed to the rest of us or not?
Yes, hopefully it would be, within reason as far as how many questions are being sent in between meetings. I think the majority of what we should be discussing should happen in these meetings, but there's certainly reasonable circumstances where questions can come up that might inform the next meeting if an answer can be disseminated to the group before that happens. I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I meant.
It appears we're talking about informational questions, not opinionated questions.
Well, we'll have opinions, but we'll talk about those opinions in these meetings. And we can, as we send issues or questions, I'd say as a group, we direct them to Steve. And if it needs to go to Maria, he can handle that for us. And then that email or question is then set up if it's set in time as an agenda item for discussion and our opinions. Does that kind of sound like where everybody's on board?
That sounds reasonable to me.
That's fair. I would make one request based on that, which would be to copy staff on any of those requests that go to me already on the email, so that then if I'm the one making the decision as to what goes out or what goes on the agenda, I can have a well-informed discussion with staff on that, save the step of distributing it out myself.
All right. Do we want to talk about the next setting up a time for the meeting? Or are there more questions about the communication between members or setting agenda items?
So I think we might have killed 2 birds with 1 stone on that, because the next item was communication, how and what staff communicates to committee members. And I think we've set some reasonable expectations here. Are there any questions still open?
Well, I'd just like to say on that, what about communication? Are we already set to be able to count on all communication between staff and the potential, providers? We have access to all of that?
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Hello?
I asked if we are able to count right now on that we all receive all communication between staff and the potential providers, the recipients and proposed responders to the RFP.
Hello? Hello, can anyone hear me?
Who's speaking?
This is Marcy Brown. I've been trying to get on since 6 o'clock. And now I'm using someone else's computer because I can't get on. I dialed the number, I did what I was supposed to do, and now I had to run over and get on someone's computer. And I'm sorry about that.
We can hear you, Marcy.
Okay, so how do I raise my hand?
I don't see your call in, but just speak up. So
Yeah, I mean, Maria, I called in, and then nobody could hear me, and I
Okay.
kept trying to call in, so I'm here. I mean, I just don't understand what happened.
okay.
I
Okay,
think how you raise your hand under Claudine's name is to open up participants, which on my computer is in the middle bottom. And that brought up a separate window that has all the panelists. And at the bottom of that, it says raise hand.
True so, but it's now covered up by the document.
Mine, I can move anywhere on the screen in front of the document. So maybe there's a way to do that on yours too.
do you hit participants? Oh, I
Yeah.
see. So, but my name isn't up there now. Oh, so I would just go under Claudine's name, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
So just to clarify, Marcy is appearing as Claudine Berger,
Yeah.
who I believe was a public comment earlier.
correct. So thank you for including me. I just could not get through no matter what I did. So sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to let you know I'm here at the meeting. Thank you.
Can she speak?
It's okay.
Yes, Marcy, you're a panelist. You can speak anytime you want. We're in open conversation right now.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just coming in a little bit late, so I apologize for that. So I will please continue the meeting. I don't want to interrupt the meeting.
Chair, if you wouldn't, I can respond to Member Green's or Vice Chair Green's question.
Absolutely, please do.
Okay. So I think your question, Carson, was the communication between staff and our two proposal submittals, the staff from those particular companies. That's typically not done, but if you want to see that, again, it's open records, so we could certainly provide it. Again, that's just not typical, but no problem if you wanted to do that, if the group wanted to do that.
I'm not saying that you have to send it all out to us in email, but maybe putting it into the structure where the files are listed so that if we want to see it all, I mean, this is obviously a controversial topic for some citizens, and I think we should err on the side of transparency and just have it all be wide open and not give people a reason to be fearful that backroom dealings are happening or anything like that. So as long as we are as upfront and transparent as possible, I don't see how that causes more problems or anything else. And I would like to be able to see all of the communication that's going on personally.
A point of information, do the respondents have parts of their proposal they specifically wanted kept confidential? In other words, might there be limits to what we can post publicly?
No, they we gave them that option through the RFP, but neither one of them chose to make anything private like that.
So I see two hands raised currently. Jeff and Christine both have hands raised. If you raise your hand and want to still speak, you can, but if you don't, then you should unraise, please.
Oops, I didn't know how to unraise. That was from my last comment, but yeah, I guess my question is, that just came to mind is how much communication is happening between staff, if any, and the haulers? I understand there has to be some logistical in setting up the meetings where we wanted to meet with each trash hauler. But my understanding was there was an initial meeting, which with each potential hauler, some of whom didn't even submit an RFP. But beyond that, I guess what does that communication look like, if anything, beyond just logistics of attending meetings?
Yeah, that's the only thing I've done so far is send them those questions and asked about the tours. That was in the same email. And so then I received the responses from each of them. And the files, the attachments with the question responses is what I sent out to the group. Was that a week or so, 2 weeks ago now? That's all that's happened.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable to share. There certainly seems from some of the public comments and some of the prior meetings, this fair or not accusation of backroom dealing or kickbacks or whatever it may be. So whatever we can do to limit any communications there and just make sure that everything's as transparent as possible, I think is in everybody's best interest.
Maybe I would suggest then, like, maybe attaching to the agenda as kind of a bottom informational or communications or something, and then copying all the emails into that for each of our agendas, because it's probably not what you need to see between meetings. And so I would just add them to our agenda, and then you can click on them and see those responses, if that's okay.
Sounds good to me if it works for others.
I have no objection to that process. I think that would be fairly well organized.
Yeah, that's actually similar to how it works in the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee too. Any of the emails that do go back and forth end up in the agenda.
Do you see a raised hand on my name?
I have two raised hands, or well, now one, and it is yours.
Okay, I guess my biggest concern is that people don't know what is going on with this one trash hauler. They see it kind of as a monopoly, and they also want to know what is in it for the city. And there has to be an option out. And I hope we all are quite clear on that you have to have an option out, especially when the majority of people are happy with their trash pickup as of now. So I think we have to take into consideration what is right for the citizens, because the citizens make up the city.
So I certainly understand that, Marcy, and I don't want to interrupt you, but when we opened this meeting, we stated that the purpose of this meeting was to discuss administrative issues primarily. We need to
Okay.
agree on communication standards. We need to agree on when and how we meet,
Okay.
among other things. So that particular comment is not administrative in nature.
Okay.
There may be room to make that comment later in the agenda, but that time is not now.
I apologize. I missed. I couldn't get on. So I apologize. I missed that part. So excuse me.
Are there any other comments? So let me just state in a nutshell what I think we just finished concluding. If there are questions from committee members, those questions can be sent to me with staff copied, and then I as chair will make a determination. I'd like to include Vice Chair Green on these communications as well if the committee doesn't have an objection. Two of us, chair and vice chair, are not a quorum, so we should be able to communicate back and forth on that with staff. Then we will determine what goes into the agenda packet as what needs to be researched immediately or what can potentially wait as a pending topic. That was the first conclusion.
I don't have an objection to including the vice chair.
Great, thank you. The second was in regards to back and forth communications between staff and the haulers that we're working with on this process. And it was agreed that those email communications, if they did occur, would be included in each agenda packet as well. Everybody on the same page there? Any objections? Go ahead.
Not an objection to that, just another thought on transparency. I agree with everything you just said. That seems great. One thing I noticed, like, as we've had the difficulty of getting the meetings scheduled with everyone, like Ms. Fenton was sending out the doodle, and like the first time she sent it out, we could all see, you know, everybody's answers. And then the second time we couldn't. I don't know if that was an intentional change in the settings to make that less transparent, but I just, again, I'm just going to always argue for erring on the side of transparency. I don't know why we would not all be able to see who can and can't attend on different days like we were on the first attempt to schedule a time where we could all come. I mean, I'm always going to be in favor of, you know, we all, you know, went out of our way to participate in this. And if we can possibly include everyone in every meeting, which I recognize is difficult because a lot of people seem to have a lot of conflicts, but, you know, I think we should be transparent about even the process of that.
Christine, I see your hand raised. Did you have something to add?
Yes, please. May I make a recommendation? I liked your idea, Chairman Ward, at the beginning of setting a set standard meeting time bi-weekly or monthly so that we don't have a doodle poll each and every time.
As long as it's tonight, maybe the second Mondays of the month.
I think that's naturally rolling us into our next agenda item. We do have item D listed here, determining decisions and next steps. But I think we might move that down in the agenda unless there's an objection to discuss first the one that we've rolled into now, which is when we can meet.
Objection.
All right, so let's open up the floor. I have a fairly open schedule. Aside from generally speaking, I also sit on the Budget Advisory Committee, so I have Tuesday meetings for BAC. And then, of course, the first Tuesday in November is Election Day, and I am completely unavailable on that day.
You mean there's an election coming up?
Yeah, something like that.
If we do it on a regular night too, well, that helps set expectations for any public comment. They can expect the same night, similar to the other committee meetings. So I'm really super open too. But like I suggested, it looks like we had a lot of attendees tonight. So I'm just gonna propose, it's Monday night and it's the second Monday of the month. Anybody on board for Monday nights, the second of the month?
I like that. I will point out that one challenge is that Monday is when council meets, and I don't know if that causes difficulty with staff. Is there a conflict there?
Yes, that was going to be my comment. Not so much concern for staff. I can manage my schedule and have other people cover that. But if there is a desire by the city council or somebody who might want to go to the city council meeting or attend that and possibly sit in on our meeting, then there would be a conflict. So in general, we try and avoid Monday nights with our board and commission meetings in general.
Okay.
Point of information. Can people have public comments at city council members' studies sessions?
No.
So that could be a possible time for us to meet, since people wouldn't be commenting then and they can watch that afterward
Later.
since those meetings are open. So Mondays could work if they were on the study session Mondays.
Good point. Yep.
Okay.
How often are we, sorry. How often are we trying to reach?
Yes, how often are we trying to meet? We're doing this monthly? It's a good question.
If we were able to do it twice monthly, we might be able to get through it a lot faster since this isn't meant to be continuing on perpetually, but just review the RFPs.
Okay. So study session Mondays is what, the first, second, third, or fourth Mondays?
Second and fourth, unless I'm mistaken.
That's correct.
Second and fourth.
Is there any other night of the week that might work?
Not Thursdays, please.
Good.
Tuesdays or Wednesdays are generally good unless a baby is arriving, which is happening in a couple weeks.
I was going to say
see-
one thing, just as difficult as it has been for everyone to be able to meet when we've been trying, and just in general, I feel like twice a month is pretty aggressive. I mean, I get it if we have like something specific timing wise to add a second, but I feel like scheduling twice a month consistently, and it feels like a lot to me. And I'm available basically any nights, preferably not Fridays.
Marcy, did you have your hand raised? All right, moving on then. Christine?
One more counterpoint to that is I felt like when we had a big gap between our meetings, we had a lot of repetition in what we'd covered previously. So a meeting more regularly might avoid some of that and help our momentum.
I agree with that. I think we need to talk more and get this done, because the longer it hangs on here, I feel like we just keep running in circles.
Well, I would move for Wednesdays because I have book club with Englewood one Thursday a night. That's it, just one Thursday a month. I mean, how about every other Wednesday then?
Are Mondays off the table?
I thought somebody said they didn't want to do Mondays. I'm going Mondays.
Not necessarily. I remain concerned about the conflict with council sessions. But that having been said, if Wednesday works well for everybody, I would pick that over Monday. But again, my availability is fairly general.
Once a month, I've got code enforcement advisory on Wednesday. And that's been bouncing around between the third and fourth Wednesday of the month.
We may have to stick with Mondays. It's only temporary. I mean, this isn't supposed to be, like you said, a forever committee.
Yeah,
No.
it sounds like second and fourth Monday might work best for everybody without too much conflict if we're going to meet twice.
That's
And
me.
I'm not sensing consensus over once a month or twice a month yet.
I don't think Mondays works very well because of council meetings and study sessions. And I'd like to listen to those and also give public comment. So I would prefer not Mondays or Fridays.
The study
And
session doesn't
I-
allow public comment, right? I'm sorry.
It's also usually only an hour long or so, or maybe a little bit longer than that, which I don't know we're going to be able to start and finish our meetings in that time. I mean, I guess my question is, how many more meetings do we think we need to get through all the RFPs and come together to make some sort of recommendation to council or request more information from haulers, perhaps?
You know, that's really hard to say because we haven't had as many discussions as we need to have, I don't think. And I think that's, you know, what we're leading up to once we get these ground rules done. I don't see us spending a lot of time into the holiday, you know, and those are coming up. I think we'll find too that people start to get very busy at the holiday, and we may have to, if we really don't come to a consensus, to take 2 city council by Thanksgiving, then we will probably be forced to go into January. But in taking our time with this, I don't have a problem with that. You know, it is a big deal, a big step for this city. I don't want to rush it.
All right, lots of hands. So we're going to go back to the more formal name calling here for a minute. So first, Cheryl, I see. All right. Matt has his hand raised. Matt, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I would be in favor of twice a month. And really I can make any day of the week work. So just so I'm on record with that.
Thank you. Next, if you wouldn't mind putting your hand down. I see Christine, you have your hand up, and then we'll go to Carson.
May we ask Marcy if the study session council Mondays might work, so twice a month on Mondays when the study session is going on, considering public comment isn't allowed then anyway, and those study sessions are recorded, so you could potentially watch or listen to them afterward?
No, I completely understand that, but I do like to watch them on Mondays. But you're right, I could watch them the next day, but I still think Mondays, they're not going to work for me. They're just not. And if I'm the only one, then that's okay. And I don't think that this actually should be rushed. I mean, I kind of agree with Carson that twice a month, that's a lot, especially with the holidays coming up. And if we need to take our time, I think we should take our time because this is a very important issue to citizens. So if we need to take more time, and I also believe that the council should be back before we make any suggestions or whatever we end up, all, whether we come to an agreement or not, of all of us. I think city council needs to get back to city hall. So people, the citizens, can understand what is going on here. And I believe totally in transparency. So that is just my opinion. And I'll
Carson,
lower
you're
my.
up.
2 things. One, I was going to say, I agree with member Hubka about not rushing this because this is a big thing. And, I recognize there was a tentative plan put together when the RFP was made of timeline, but it's not unreasonable for that timeline to change this year, especially with the pandemic circumstance. And I don't think we should rush this. And then the other point I had was just, there's a couple of people who are not on here tonight, and maybe they couldn't make Monday, or maybe that's an ongoing issue for them and that we should take them into account too.
That's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up, Carson. I'll also note here, I've been using first names. That's just a heck of a lot easier for me. So I hope nobody minds, but feel free to send me an email if you would prefer for me to address you formally.
I didn't mind. Well, maybe we need to do another survey. Just one more survey. I don't know if that'll work, but because I think we can agree, maybe we can compromise and do one meeting a month, but one of those Mondays, Marcy. What about just one of the study sessions instead of both?
That would be okay. All I'm saying is that as long as it falls on a study session and not on a council meeting, I would appreciate that. So I'm easy on that one.
So I have a question here, just administratively. Is it possible to do a no-go doodle poll? So respondents would be asked, rather than saying what nights they are available, to click on what nights they have hard no's.
Maria?
We can certainly look into that. Lorraine, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, if you've done a Google poll like that. The other thing we could do to get around that is just, like give people options like Monday through Friday of a particular week. And then it's not for that day, but just in general, can you do Mondays? Can you do Tuesdays, Wednesdays, that sort of thing? And we could explain that in the poll as it goes out.
That would be good. I'm particularly compelled by the question of the members who did not attend tonight. So I'm a little hesitant to make a decision on our schedule going forward based upon the fact that we do have members that aren't here with us tonight.
And I believe everybody's here except Kanji, so we do have 10 tonight.
Isn't there a member, Tanaz Sarbaz?
She was our admin. She was filling in prior to Nancy.
Sorry, I didn't realize that was staff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what I would suggest doing, let's handle the other raised hands first. I'm trying to pay attention to two things at once. Dane, your hand is raised.
I actually like your idea of giving us some days of no-goes and actually us voting on a more permanent setup of, every other Tuesday, every other Thursday, because at least that way we could figure it out a little better in terms of which days would work for us. Because it's hard when we're all just talking, and I like the idea of the hard nose because there are certain things that people can't miss. I'm a chiropractor. I can take off time in the evening times, but I need to know 2 weeks ahead of time so I can do that. So just a recommendation so that we set it up. I think it's worthwhile.
So if you don't mind putting your hand down, if you have completed, I see Christine's hand is up as well. Christine, did you have something to add?
Yeah, as to the frequency of how often we meet, I also agree that it's not something that should be rushed. We shouldn't make a rash recommendation, but on the other hand, a lot of what we have to talk about, we could talk about every other week as opposed to monthly and still have almost the same conversations. In other words, we just have a lot of information we have to go through. And it would take almost the same amount of time, whether we're talking once a month or whether we're talking twice a month. So moving it to once a month seems like delaying it and dragging it out perhaps more than necessary, plus rehashing what we'd already talked about a month ago.
So I would like to address this question of once a month or twice a month here pretty quickly. The first question before I do that is, does everybody have access to and know how to use the raise hand function? Because I think the most organized way to do this is to just have each person once a month raise their hand, or twice a month raise their hand, and then I will call off the names of the people as if I was taking roll.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, we all do. So that's how you note your participation, you mean, for future meetings, by raising your hand when you come into the meeting?
Right, so not everybody's on camera, and rather than have everybody try to speak aye or nay, yes or no, what I'll ask is if you are advocating for a 1 day per week meeting, 1 day, or 1 day per month, rather than bi-weekly meetings, if you would just raise your hand now as in favor of that opinion, I will call off the names as they are raised.
So we're voting. Okay.
So if everyone has raised their hand, I see 4 raised hands. The first is my own. Vice Chair Green, Carson, Marcy, and Felicia have all advocated in favor of once per month. I believe that leaves the majority in favor of twice per month, but we will repeat the same exercise just for the record. Twice per month meetings, likely bi-weekly on a fixed day of each month. If you would please raise your hand if that is what you favor. think the math works out correctly. I see six raised hands, which means that the majority is in favor of twice monthly meetings. That would be Christine, Cheryl, Matt, Brenda, Jeff, and Dane.
Can I add that as we make some progress into this, we could change it back to monthly, especially as the holidays come up. You know, I mean, I don't think this needs to be permanent. Let's give it a try.
I agree, and thank you for pointing that out, Brenda. I currently have 2 raised hands. Matt, you go first. Brenda just spoke.
Sorry, I was still voting.
Okay. No raised hands. Okay, so we've at least managed to agree on one thing, which is we will plan to meet twice a month going forward for the time being. I would say that it would probably be best for us to tonight determine the day of our next meeting so that we have a fixed plan going forward. And then if we're going to poll the members on what night works best for them, we can do that simultaneous so that we have the conclusions of the poll available for our next meeting. Does anybody object to that method?
No.
Hearing no objections, I think that's a plan going forward. My suggestion for our next meeting would be 2 weeks from today's meeting, which is the 26th of October. And aside from the question of settling out the rest of the meeting plan, that would be a business meeting where we would actually discuss the proposals.
Send us an agenda for that, or we'll have a meeting to discuss the agenda.
So we will sort out the agenda the way we discussed previously. Suggested agenda items can go to the chair and vice chair. And then roughly a week before the meeting, I'd like to get the agenda out so that everybody knows what we will be discussing at the following meeting. I see Maria has her hand raised. Maria, did you have something to add?
Just that night, I do have an agenda item already on the 26th, so I'll probably have to be absent from this meeting for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So I just will be late. But we'll kick off the meeting with Lorraine, and if you can just know the staff won't be available for that first little bit.
If there aren't other objections, we could just kick that meeting forward to 6:15 and plan to start when you can join us.
No objections.
That's what I'd like to do. So we'll schedule that for 6:15. Jeff, did you have a comment?
Just that I will certainly, if I'm not in the hospital that week, I will be attending, but that is a possibility.
Well, from what I hear, congratulations are in order. I hope everything goes well. So I think we've got our agenda hashed out for our schedule hashed out for at least our next meeting. And then we can determine at that meeting what we plan to do going forward from there as far as an expected night. That brings us back to the item that we skipped, which is determining decisions and next steps. Don't all speak at once. Jeff?
One thing I was just going to say, I liked the way that you just did the voting with the hands. That was pretty effective, and I think we ought to keep doing that for maybe all votes.
I think we can do that. It'll be challenging if we have members joining us by the phone because they won't have the hand raise function, but we can do our best to work around that. So Is there anything that folks would like to discuss at our next meeting? Let's start there. We've covered the administrative items that we need to discuss at our next meeting. Anything regarding the proposals that we would like on the agenda at the next meeting? Lots of hands. Sorry, I'm asleep at the wheel here. Christine.
Mute.
You
You're on
gotta
mute.
unmute yourself. I'm sorry, Christine, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. A point of information, we're probably going to have too much to talk about at the next meeting. Will you help prioritize things and let us know how we move things we don't cover over to future agendas?
Hopefully we can agree on the most important ones as a committee, but we'll just kind of throw some stuff at the wall at this point and see if
Okay.
anything sticks.
Can I add a handful of things that I hope we could talk about, and then you can help prioritize where they fall? We heard earlier the administrative fee and the opt-out fee for people that aren't participating. That was one that Marcy mentioned that we should discuss. Second, it would be nice to discuss our recommendation as to whether it should be a city council vote versus a vote of the public. And that had come up in a previous call too. We also discussed recycling broadly and whether it should be included in the base fee and how that should go. Then we have large item pickup, compost, and price comparisons between all the different levels of service and add-ons. So basically the topics of the RFP.
Thank you, Christine. Carson, you're next on the line. I'm actually just going down the list here as opposed to hand raising order. So bear with me on that. Carson, please go.
Well, I guess I'll continue with topics for the list to be prioritized. She already mentioned admin fees. I mean, we're going to need to know what the city's thinking admin fee wise before we can even evaluate it for making our own recommendations as well. And then the penalties, you know, it had been brought up early on that, at least I brought it up, and some people seem to like the idea that penalties should potentially go to citizens in some cases. There's some of the questions that I had included in the list of questions to go to the providers that didn't get to them. And I'm curious if we can do another round of that, because even before necessarily having our interview with them directly, there could be more questions to get answers to. And part of that was because Ms. Fenton wasn't sure how to break up some of the questions. So you guys can see them all there. I had questions that are on the far right tab of the Excel sheet that went out under questions answers, but some of them didn't get to the trash companies. One big one I was real curious about is the actual percentage of what goes through the actually gets recycled. Because I know that a huge amount of recycled materials that used to go to China are now rejected. And I've looked into that some, and I know that a lot of things that used to be recycled and can go through recycling can end up in landfills. And I think we should have perspective on what's going on there. And then I also brought up, like, there were some questions asked to the providers about customer communications, but I feel like it should be an improvement in service to the way people deal with this, that if someone's reporting like a missed pickup or a problem, etc., that they should not have to wait on a phone line or wait for a chat person to come up. They should be able to fill out a form and hit send, and it becomes the responsibility of the provider to respond to that when they get to it. You shouldn't have to sit on like, I know these are providers are saying that their average response time is less than a minute, but that's because they're taking into account all time of the day, probably, where there's, nobody waiting in the middle of the night. Whereas when there's actually a missed pickup, that type of thing is going to have a ton of people calling. And I know only the 2 times I've ever needed to call the trash company, and there's like a 15-minute phone wait, and there's no other way to communicate what you're trying to communicate. So I feel like that's an important topic that we should be including in this as well.
So I heard a few there, customer service standards, recycling performance, and a contract provisions regarding penalties for failure to perform. And again, the administrative and opt-out. All right, Carson, if you did already put your hand out. Brenda, you're next.
Unmute. Okay. I sent you I sent you a member's choice topics too, and we won't do this via email anymore, that I wanted to bring up, and that is basically customer service or service assurance. I too really don't want to press on with this proposal without seeing what the actual contract looks like and what obligations that they have to fill with service assurance. That's one. And two, I want to discuss options for getting a better price point with both these, with any carrier, because I think there's other ways to do it. So that's what, anyway, you have those 2 topics. That's what I would like to discuss.
Customer service and pricing, which I believe Christine also brought up pricing.
All right.
Brenda, if you don't mind putting your hand down.
Basically comparing the prices, whereas Brenda was suggesting options for negotiating lower prices.
Thank you for that clarification. Jeff, you're up.
Not necessarily a specific agenda item, but I guess I'm just trying to, last meeting, we discussed actually sitting down and meeting with these haulers so we could have an open discussion, which I think there's some definite value to and is perhaps more efficient than written questions back and forth, although it's definitely nice to hold them to something in writing too. Is that still our intent? Are we planning to have another additional administrative or meeting to discuss proposal items in general before diving into that? I'm just trying to think about the way forward here. Do we want to start talking directly to haulers, and which I think the plan was to do that with both haulers, probably over the course of 2 meetings, I'm guessing. But so maybe that's an agenda item for next time, I guess, or we can try to plan the way forward on that here.
I think we should discuss that now. I believe we did have something agendaed for that, and because of the inability to find a night that would work for all the members as well as the haulers, we ended up canceling that. Maria, can you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, that was the intent. We were trying to find a date that worked to have the intent was to have the question and answer in written form, have you guys be able to review those, and then have a follow-up discussion in person with each of the proposers. But we have not scheduled that in lieu of this meeting, basically, to get these administrative tasks set.
So I guess my question would be for the group then, do we all feel we need to have another meeting to discuss amongst ourselves before we talk to trash haulers? That's what it's sounding like right now.
I know I would personally be more comfortable with that. Does anybody else have any other comment on that?
I would. Oh, I think that's a good idea.
Just to clarify, Marcy, to wait until after our next meeting or to schedule it now?
No, I think what Jeff said was that we would need to talk again before we
Yeah,
I believe that's what Jeff was saying, correct? That we need to have one more meeting before we talk to the trash companies. Is that what you were saying, Jeff? I'm sorry.
That's what it's sounding like, just based on the number of topics we have to
Yeah,
discuss amongst ourselves.
I agree.
I agree. Because we haven't even been able to discuss the question and answers that we've already received.
So I don't know if you've gotten inquiries on this from the providers, Maria, but it sounds like right now the answer would be probably not the next meeting, but the one following that would be a good time for us to schedule for that.
Yeah, so I'll reach out to them and, well, I guess we'll have to set the dates. But I'll tell them probably sometime, I guess it'd be early to mid-November at this point.
Sounds right to me. Jeff, did you have anything else to add?
Nope.
All right, next on the list is Felicia. Jeff, if you wouldn't mind lowering your hand, that would be helpful.
It's already kind of been addressed. I think that I wanted to make sure we were still in the process of actually being able to talk with the companies directly. And just to clarify, will we have the agenda a week ahead of time before next meeting? We have so much information at this point. I think it's going to be necessary for us to really come prepared with specific topics to address, because it's a lot to kind of sort through and be able to make a knowledgeable recommendation, just with kind of the vast amount of information that we've gotten so far.
So the overall notification requirement is 24 hours to notice a public meeting in the law, but I prefer a 1 week timeline if that's not too ambitious for staff. Would that work okay, Maria? I know we did, I think, 6 days this time, and that seemed to work okay, but 7 would be ideal.
Yeah, we can certainly shoot for that. The 26th may be a challenge, but we'll do our best.
Okay, good. Did you have anything to add, Felicia?
I don't think so. Other than if we won't have the agenda ahead of time for next meeting, like, are there, I don't know, as a group, and maybe it's too complicated to figure out like the 3 kind of priority topics to really be able to come prepared to discuss. And maybe I'm the only one feeling like it's just a lot of information to sort through. And so like retaining everything and then coming prepared for a lot of different questions sounds like it won't be productive, but if other people aren't having that issue, that's okay too.
No, if I heard correctly, we're going to shoot for 7 days, but the timeline may be more like 6 or 5 before the meeting, but there will definitely be an agenda released before the meeting. And since the meeting is planned to be on a Monday, that would have to happen on Friday under the law, because the notice, it has to be 24 hours ahead of the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, Marcy.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could talk a little bit next time we meet about what are we looking at as far as, and I don't even know if we have the answer to this yet, as far as an administrative fee for people who do want to opt in, and if we can talk about not having an administrative fee for people who want to opt out. I mean, is that something that we can get by the next time we meet, or is that further on down the line? Because I know that's a lot of people's, it's a concern. And I just spoke to a neighbor of mine today that said there is no way he is opting into this because of all the fees involved and so on and so forth. He does listen to the meetings, and he's like, why are we paying an administrative fee to the city? Except, so I I think that we need to settle that one way or another, and also to let people know what will be the administrative fee. And like I said, I don't know if that's further on down the line or if we can discuss this sooner than later.
So I think we can certainly discuss it. And you're the third member, if my count is correct, to bring up that topic. I concur. It would be nice to have some information regarding what exactly would be planned for that. But again, the purpose of the committee is to make recommendations. So to the extent we would be talking about any specific plan at our next meeting, I don't think that would necessarily be possible. But if we want to conclude or concur or decide on what our recommendation would be relative to that, we certainly can.
Do you know when that might be? I mean, are we looking like a month down the road, a couple of months? I mean, I'm not trying to exactly pinpoint you to a date. I'm just asking, when you think that conversation would take place.
Maria, do you have anything to add on that?
We can certainly have the administrative fee topic at the next agenda on the 26th.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I gotta lower my hand.
Thank you, Marcy. Brenda, you're next.
I was just going to add on to Felicia's point about information inundation. And it brings to mind how much we can actually cover in a meeting. We do have a lot to go through. So is there a time, are we going to set these meetings for 1 hour, 2 hours, or just go until we're all out of breath?
I really hope not that. That last one. I think 2 hours works well. It provides us enough time to have the discussion. I don't know if other members have other ideas about that. You can go ahead and raise your hand if you want to weigh in on the length of the meetings.
How long are other city council committee meetings? The art council was about an hour. That's what we did once a month, but it was art council. It wasn't exactly controversial.
Yeah, budget advisory committee, 75 minutes.
Yeah.
Jeff, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of having a set start and end time after attending a lot of meetings that a lot of things get accomplished in the last 10 minutes, and it can kind of keep us efficient and on track when you know you don't have all night.
2 hours seems like a long time to me. About an hour and 30 minutes.
I mean, if we are going to 2 meetings a week, maybe that is a potential compromise position, is just reduce our time to 90 minutes. I see Carson's hand raised, so I would like to acknowledge Carson at this point.
Code enforcement's 2 hours fixed time. I agree with Member Frazier about fixed time. I think 2 hours is pretty reasonable, especially when you're digging into complicated stuff. I think an hour is too short, hour and a half. I think we'd be coming up against it in the middle of discussion. Whereas I feel like 2 hours is pretty reasonable for everyone's attention to be able to be focused on it.
Two hands raised. Jeff and Carson, are there any other comments? So I thought I heard consensus about sticking to 2 hour meetings. Is everybody on board with that? If you don't mind, I'll do another one of the same type of poll. Raise your hand if you concur with 2 hour meetings. Please use the raise hand function. Great, another unanimous vote. Everybody's on board. 2 hours it is. Does anybody else have anything else that they would like to throw in as an agenda item for the next meeting, to be considered as an agenda item, I should say? So at the risk of belaboring it, I'll just run down what I wrote down here. And if I miss anything, feel free to raise your hand. Administrative fee, opt-out fee, question of whether this should be a ballot measure or a council decision. recycling included in the base fee or not, large item pickup, compost, and price comparison of the proposals. Penalty provisions or contract enforcement, recycling performance as to whether or not the recycling is actually happening, customer service, pricing, and a negotiation of the prices, which is similar to but not the same as the price comparison portion. Time for an open discussion with haulers, which I believe we agreed will be in not our next meeting, but the one following that. And a meeting time length we agreed on for 2 hours. And Carson, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, one more of my questions that didn't get asked was around the yard waste. Whether, like, because in the proposals, at least one of them, it was that you'd have to schedule for yard waste. And I was curious if that is actually going to the environmentally appropriate destination or not. So, and I had broken out like several questions around yard waste. So I just want to make sure that we get the appropriate details laid out to find out the answers to that as part of it too.
Maria, do you know if that was sent to the haulers and or if it wasn't, is it something that can be?
We had 2 deadlines, so we summarized everything that we received. I'll have to go back and look if those questions were included or not. If they weren't, then we can certainly send those out to the haulers again. And I can ask for those responses back before our next meeting.
Thank you. Does that satisfy the question, Carson?
Yeah, I mean, my questions were included by the requested date, and they were included in the Excel spreadsheet on questions answers. They just weren't included on the actual questions that went to the haulers. Several of the details of what I asked.
Christine, I see your hand again.
Yes, thanks. We may have additional questions that come up too. I don't know if you want to keep bugging them over and over, or if you want to wait till we have our next full second round of questions. But that's up to you, Maria, how you think is best.
Christine, we lost you. I think you're remuted there for a minute.
Oh, sorry. I said I need to lower my hand while I remember what my question was.
Oh, sorry. We can certainly send any additional questions out ahead of time, or, have our discussion. Let's just assume Monday's work. Our next meeting would then be tentatively November 9th, Monday, November 9th. So we could summarize all additional questions on the night of our meeting on the October 26th, send them out the next day and ask for responses by the 9th or a few days before.
So in this case, I'd like to defer that to Carson, since he's indicated that he did already ask the questions and they either weren't sent or weren't answered. Carson, are you okay waiting until another round of questions, or would you like those to go over right away?
Oh no, I think I was bringing that up just so that it was added to your list for our prioritization discussion next time. I wasn't saying we need to send out another round of questions immediately.
Okay, good. I got it. Yard waste and how yard waste is handled. Particularly, I would add, if I just might color that a little bit relative to the other waste streams. Sorry, my face is lit by my computer screen, which keeps going out because of the screensaver. So that's why you see darkness in the light. One hand, Christine.
Thanks. A few of those items on our agenda list maybe could be grouped together, even though they're not exactly the same thing. They could be put next to each other, such as the recycling percentage and the broader recycling discussion, and maybe the price comparisons and the price negotiation points, some things like that. Possibly yard waste and compost, even those are separate, but there's some items like that that we kind of group together.
Yeah, I think we'll work that out when we through the agenda. Carson and I work through the agenda with staff, but yeah, I'd like to do those sort of large neighborhood type things like administrative fees and customer service standards all kind of fit in the general sort of city administered perspective. So we can talk about those things. And then, some of the more detailed items on how waste is handled, we would put under another agenda. All right, well, if I'm reading this agenda correctly, we've covered everything that was on our agenda. We do have one item here that says old business. Was there anything that was left unaddressed from previous meetings? Brenda, you did bring up some of the items that you emailed. If you'd like to address those now, I'll give you the opportunity.
Oh, no, I didn't know it was going to be on the agenda, but I will bring up, then we're going to talk about service assurance next time and what kind of metrics we're going to ask the companies to provide. I was just going to suggest that they conduct a survey once a year and gauge customer support or customer satisfaction. And we can talk about that later. I just hate to see everybody going to city council meetings to voice their complaints. But one of the biggest things I really wanted to bring up, and because I have a lot of experience in negotiating long-term contracts, was that this price point is not beneficial compared to what a lot of people have today. And I think that one of the ways to get that price down is to extend the contract length, the term. Now, that would require another bid, but keep in mind, you can do various bids at the same time. Often I put out a bid that'll be for 5 years, but then I also put the same exact bid out for 7, 10, sometimes even 20 years, just to see what kind of pricing they'll give me based on these long-term numbers. So again, that was going to be on next week's agenda. If we can discuss that, I don't know if this is a make or break 5-year deal based on this price point. I could not rubber stamp that. So I think, thank you for letting me bring it up, but we do have our work cut out for us in discussing this.
So I added that as a potential item, 10-year or 5-year contract or general contract length. I think that would be one of the details we could potentially discuss at the same time we're talking about things like customer service standards and opt-out provisions and other administrative details. And I see Carson's hand raised.
I was really just going to say that I really appreciated Member Hubka's email and concepts, and I think that's a great thing to dig into and discuss. And anything we can do to make this a better deal for citizens, I'm all for it.
All right. Does anyone else have anything to add? We will consider this section members' choice. Oh, I guess we didn't have members' choice on the agenda. Is there anything left to add? Carson, your hand's still raised. Is that by accident?
That's a new one. Yeah, one other thing I noticed when I was going through, I mean, I know that we'll end up discussing their questions, but just something I noticed, and to put it out there, was I think it was Waste Management's response about why was there, I know we're going to talk about fees and stuff, but just so that everyone's aware of this, they mentioned that their fee was higher because than Waste Services, who's selling, Waste Management's. So Waste Services is that company that I switched to, that I sent you guys the invoice for, that is actually charging $21 a month for everything, including yard waste, anytime you put it out. But they said that they are able to charge less because they're covering, door-to-door outreach, sales, customer service, and billing. And under this proposal, some of those things won't exist. There's no need to do outreach and sales, and the city's doing billing. So that doesn't seem like a very valid question as to why they'd be charging the city more than they'd be charging through waste services.
Christina, I see your hand raised.
I think that they were charging less in the bid. They were charging 18 something as opposed to 21 something. But what we're missing in the equation is the tipping fees plus the administrative fees. So I don't know if we can do an apples to apples comparison until we get a ballpark or a range of what the tipping fee might be and what the administrative fee might be. But just on the surface, their initial bid was lower by a couple bucks.
Right. I was just assuming, and we know it's going to be higher because we have this unknown admin fees and tipping fees. And it's not lower when you consider yard waste.
True. And another thing a question I had was, does waste services cut customer service? Do they have longer wait times, et cetera, as a way to cut those costs? What are they skimping on that would reduce customer service?
So I see Marcy's hand raised. Marcy, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm sorry, maybe this is too much for next time we meet, but I would also like to ask is why for seniors or disabled people, why there is no discount. And maybe that's just too much for the next meeting, but people have been asking me that because they can get, these discounts from other trash haulers. So I'm just putting that out there. It may be too much, like I said, for the next meeting, but every dollar counts to a lot of people in this city, especially when you're on a fixed income. So I was just curious as to why they won't do anything like that. And then apparently, if you are disabled and they have to come up to your doorstep or, take your hauler down, it's a fee. I guess I don't understand why there's a fee for that when you physically cannot do that and why there is no senior discount. So, maybe again, like I said, it's too much for the next time, but I would like that addressed at some point. Thank you.
If I could jump in, one thing I saw in their responses to the questions is that Waste Management offers a 10% discount for seniors. Republic does not offer any current discounts for seniors. We don't know about Waste Connections or Alpine, but we know that Republic currently doesn't offer anything for seniors. And then as to the door to curb service, both of them said somewhere in their responses that for people that are physically disabled, that is included, not an extra charge. We also saw that for people that just want their trash cans returned to their door or garage as a luxury, so they're not physically disabled, but they want that as a convenience, then they charged, if I remember right, $15 for Waste Management and $10 for Republic in the bids. But Waste Management, if you're just a current customer now, how things are now, charges $35 for that. So they went down $20. And again, those numbers are off the top of my head, so I'm sorry if they're wrong.
I just want to respond to you is that I know people who have Republic and they can make deals with them. That if you pay like a year in advance, they take off quite a bit. I don't know if it's 10, 15, 20%, but if you pay for the full year, they do. I know they do in Centennial, so I don't know why they would not do that in Englewood. And maybe I'm misinformed, but I thought that if you were disabled, that they were still going to charge you a fee. So maybe I was misinformed on that. but I know the waste services do not offer discounts, that I do know. But I have spoken to people who have Republic and they can make deals with them. So
Thank you, Marcy. Carson is next. He has his hand raised. So Carson, please go ahead.
I was just gonna add response to the details of Marcy's request and what Christine said. Waste Management on their response to the answers said that currently, if you have direct waste management and you're physically disabled, they do not charge a fee for the valet service, but they do charge $35 if you're opting into it without a physical need. And I couldn't find anything about Republic responding to having that as a free thing for disabled. So I may be missing that, but I don't see any response, any detail on that.
Anyone else have any comments? There's your hand again, Christine.
I think like Marcy was saying, we may be able to attempt to negotiate some of these items. And I think we put that in a further agenda item. We know that they answered specifically to our questions that they don't offer a specific senior discount, but they probably do offer discounts and negotiations for people that call them directly to say, do you have any specials or do you have any way that I can lower my bills? And I think that that might be part of our discussion under the price comparisons and any ideas we can have to ask them about where we can lower the price, right?
Certainly something we can add to the discussion at a later date, possibly next meeting. Marcy, I see your hand raised again.
yeah, I'm sorry. I was just curious as to, again, this may be on another agenda, but I certainly hope that we're going to let people know about all the fees involved and, so on and so forth. So they do get the whole picture of what they're getting into. So I guess that's it.
Yeah, we don't intend to keep that secret. That's part of what we're discussing.
Absolutely. And I agree with that. So thank you.
Anybody else? I'm gonna call last call here. I know we're a little early, it's 7:45, but if we don't have anything else to add before we see each other once again in 2 weeks, I am ready to adjourn this meeting.
Do you want to move to adjourn or are you just going to call it?
I was probably just going to call it, but if we want to formally adjourn, we can. Not hearing any objections, I will note this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Have a
Okay.
good one.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.